Hello and welcome to a very special Thanksgiving edition of Varsity360. I'm Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined once again by Meg Wochnick. And if we're talking football on Thanksgiving, it can only be because we have teams playing in the state semifinals of the Class 1A and the Class 4A football playoffs. We are here to break all that down with a special Thanksgiving theme to serve up to you a bounty of high school football. Meg, here we are, 2 weeks left in the high school football season. We hope for Seton Catholic and Camas.
Absolutely. You know, it's always an exciting time when you get to play and practice on Thanksgiving. Both teams practiced this morning. A couple of hours just before diving into that turkey meal later this afternoon. So it's always a special time to be practicing, and a privilege as well to be practicing on Thanksgiving weekend. All
right. Well, we will serve up first a main course where we dive into the matchups this weekend at Husky Stadium: Camas versus Gonzaga Prep, Seton Catholic versus Montesano. We will serve up a side dish. What stood out last weekend in two dramatic football games at Doc Harris Stadium, and what do those teams need to continue to do to continue that success here through the semifinals? And finally, we have a sweet treat, some dessert that will serve up. What is the key to getting to the state title games the following weekend at Husky Stadium? So let's dive right into it. A main course. We'll start with our first helping of Camas versus Gonzaga Prep. Tell me about this matchup, Meg, and how do you think Camas fares against a team that is pretty much a traditional power from the Spokane area?
Yeah, a little bit about Gonzaga Prep. This is their first appearance in the semi since 2015, and that year the Bullpups went all the way to win the Class 4A state championship. So this is probably, talking with a number of folks on the east side, probably the second best team on the east side of the mountains behind Chiawana. So this is an undefeated Bullpups team that runs a triple option offense, maybe a little bit more rare than the wing T. There's not many teams, 3A or 4A, that run that triple option. So basically, the quarterback has three options when he gets the snap. He can either keep it, he can pass it off to the fullback as that first option, or he can pitch it out to that slot back or wing back. But one of the probably most dangerous offensive weapons is Gonzaga Prep's 6'4" wideout, Isaiah Dawkins. He's a good one, only a junior, so he's had some massive games this season, and I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup, especially defensively. Not a lot of teams run on Camas with that front seven just stuffing the run game so many times this season against their opponents. So I think if Camas stays home, does its job, plays disciplined football like we know they can, they're going to be just fine, and looking forward to Husky Stadium that first weekend in December.
Well, that's going to be a really interesting matchup, especially considering that in the quarterfinals on Saturday against Arlington, they faced an offense that really liked to air it out and was able to hook up for some deep passes early in the game, but then Camas made some adjustments and really kind of kept that under wraps in the second half. How do you think Camas is going to change its approach defensively from what they did last week to combat a entirely new scheme that they're now facing?
Sure. As far as changing things up, I don't think there's going to be many changes. As great as defensive coordinator Dan Kilty and that defensive assistant staff is, preparing for the triple option is going to take work, but I have no doubt that they will be prepared to face that Gonzaga Prep team that, you know, you think of the triple option and it's kind of like that wing T, right? You follow the ball, keep your eyes on the ball, stay disciplined. You're going to see a lot of misdirection because that's what the triple option is. So that front seven of Camas is going to be tested, but they've been tested a lot this season as well and done just fine in that run game.
Absolutely. Defensively for Gonzaga Prep, is there any wrinkle that Camas on the offensive side might see from the Bullpups?
You know, I think one thing I think Gonzaga Prep might try to test is the Camas secondary because of someone like Isaiah Dawkins. Camas doesn't have anyone size-wise to go up with him in the secondary. So if the run game isn't working for GP, look to see them throw downfield, and we're going to see if that secondary can stop someone like Dawkins.
All right, Camas versus Gonzaga Prep, 1 p.m., Mackenzie Stadium. And if you're a football fan, be sure you stick around for the nightcap coming right afterwards, 4 p.m., Seton Catholic versus Montesano. It's a West Side throwdown between an emerging team, a program in Seton Catholic that is now in the state semifinals for a second time in a row against a traditional power in Montesano, a Montesano team that has just gotten better as the season has gone along and brought an end to La Center's season last weekend at Woodland High School, winning in the quarterfinals. Seton versus Montesano. What do you expect from that matchup?
You know, this is going to be two drastic styles of offenses. So you think of Montesano, and it's not going to be that air raid 35, 40 points a game. So they've really made a name for themselves, especially in the second half of the season, really on defense. So I touched it last week, kind of looking ahead to the quarterfinal game against La Center. Terry Jensen is one of the best coaches in all of Washington, regardless of classifications. He's got 300 plus victories. He won a state championship 12 years ago with Montesano. This is their first trip, though, to the semi since 2015. So it's been a minute for the Bulldogs, but this team is very disciplined on defense. That's, I think, what impressed me the most about Montesano was holding La Center to just 10 points. In fact, they held Isaiah Cromie and Wyatt Eislander, starting quarterback, to just 80 yards total rushing for the game. So that's pretty hard to do against a very disciplined La Center team that likes to run the ball all season. Well,
and against a La Center team, too, that had hung up, 35 points on them in week one. So that just shows how much progress Montesano has made during the course of the season. Now, obviously, we touched on it that this is sort of a different Montesano team at this time, a team that you can't really compare to earlier in the season just because of that progress that they made. But what do you think Seton likes in its matchup against the Bulldogs?
I think they like their speed, first and foremost. I'm going to be interested to see just that passing attack, how lethal it is for Seton if they're going to get out early and jump early on Montesano. I think that's going to be telling those first 1 to 3 drives of the game. This might be, a 3 or 4 score game if Seton can rely on that speed and just pretty much outwork and outman Montesano. Like I mentioned, these are two very different styles of ball than we saw in the quarterfinal win against a Life Christian team that was pretty much toe-to-toe the entire game. In that win for Seton last weekend at Doc Harris.
All right, well, let's go right into that very appetizing side dish. Looking back at the game of the weekend, if not the game of the year. Seton Catholic 42, Life Christian Academy 41. We kind of had an idea that this might be a really competitive matchup. Well, you talked about it, just how many good athletes Life Christian has, how many points they can score, the problems they can create with their dual threat quarterback, Jabez Boyd, and just how this was going to be a test really that Seton hadn't faced all year. Well, it was one of these back and forth games. Seton kind of, gets some momentum in the first half. Life Christian rallies back. They take the lead in the second half. Seton responds. It's tied going into the final half of the fourth quarter. Life Christian goes down, takes the lead. It ends up only being a 6-point lead because of, we can talk about this, the decision by Dan Chase to enforce a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the point after try that kept the Cougars within 6. And then the Cougars go down, score, a quick hitting drive set up by a big kickoff return by Joe Colorami. And then the defense holds, and Joe Colorami bats down a Hail Mary pass on the final play of the game. Seton Catholic, one of the more dramatic wins you can ask for. You can't help but be riding high after a game like that.
Oh, no question. I think what impressed me most about Seton Catholic was that poise and that determination. This is a team that for the first time all year was outgained. 450 yards total for Life Christian, about 65, 70 fewer yards for Seton Catholic. So this is a team in Seton that really hasn't been tested very much this year outside of the La Center game in week 9. So to see this outcome, I was up in Sumner covering Skyview Sumner's quarterfinal, and I was following really the final 5 minutes of game time through social media and saying, oh my gosh, they're down 6. All of a sudden they're up 1 inside a minute to go, and to knock down that Hail Mary, Joe Colorami, we've talked about it now, a 2-time league MVP in some capacity. He's just comes up in those big moments when you expect someone to. He's a West Point commit, and back-to-back semifinal appearances for these Cougars.
Yeah, Joe Colorami making his impact felt all over the field last week. Jacob Williams with a really strong game at running back. I think he had 2, if not 3 touchdowns. But what I thought really stuck out for me was how Seton's poise in the second half. There were 2 interceptions. One was just an errant throw. The other, not quarterback Colton Gesser's fault. It went through the hands of the receiver. It should have been a catch and ended up kind of being bobbled into the hands of the defender. But those are 2, especially in a close game in the second half, that if a team doesn't have the mental fortitude and the let's pick our teammate up kind of attitude that Joe Colorami talked about post-game. He basically said that's football. It's about picking up your brother. When someone makes a mistake, you got to make a good play to pick that guy up. And that's exactly what Seton did in overcoming those 2 turnovers in the second half. But what might have been one of the more consequential moments came when Life Christian Academy took the lead inside the final 2 minutes and got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for taunting on the play. And that gave Coach Dan Chase a choice. Do you enforce the penalty on the point after try, or do you enforce the penalty on the kickoff and maybe set yourself up to respond in better field position? Meg, obviously there's pros and cons of each decision. What do you think was the thought process, and what were the pros and cons in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, learning about that he had that basically that option, I thought, what a gutsy call by Coach Chase to do it on the PAT, knowing that maybe Life Christian special teams, as far as the kicking and the PAT, might not be a strength of theirs, but also giving a nod to your own special teams and your own kickoff specialists and Joe Colorami, knowing that, hey, you know what, if we're not going to take the 15 yards closer, I'm going to trust my guys and do that on the PAT attempt. So you're forcing Life Christian and in a crazy moment to basically make that call, that 2-point conversion play 15 yards further back. I just think it was a great play call by Coach Dan Chase to force Life Christian into deciding that moment, what play they're going to call 15 yards further back. Ultimately, it was batted down. They're down 1. All of a sudden, Joe takes the kickoff back inside plus territory. 4 plays later, they score to go up 1. So I think it was just a great call by Coach Chase.
Well, I think it shows not only a ton of confidence in a kick returner like Joe Colorami to not need that extra 15 yards to get yourself in good position. It shows a ton of confidence in your offense to say, we are going to score. Do we want to be down by 6 or down by 7? Right. Are we going to punch it in for the tie, or are we going to punch it in for the win? And in this case, after the point after was converted in the final minute, it ended up being for the win.
And a tremendous defensive play by Colorami and that hands team batting that down, potentially a game-winning touchdown with zeros on the clock to preserve the win. So just a tremendous game. And I kind of figured it would be a track meet, and it absolutely was, 42-41.
All right, let's move on to Camas and what stood out and what they need to do to continue that success. For me, Camas, they're just a team that had no weaknesses last Saturday. It was sort of a track meet in the first quarter, each team going back and forth. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. Back-to-back touchdowns on first 2 drives for each team. But then Camas really settled in. They I talked to Adam Matheson for a while after the game, and he gave me a little bit of insight into the game plan and the philosophy. It's like, like, yeah, it's not that unusual for teams to, come out throwing haymakers, but then the game kind of settles in. And what do you do when the game settles in? What Camas did was they really started prizing time of possession, ball control. They really came out with some long extended drives in the second half, and then that defense made the adjustments necessary to take away that big play threat that Arlington had with their passing game. It ended up just being, I thought, just sort of a clinic on, in-game adjustments, two good football teams, great atmosphere, and we can talk about quarterback Jake Davidson and what he did, again, using his legs. Meg, something that you have been talking about all year, that part of his game really paying dividends in not only on Saturday, but the entire season.
Yeah, not only just Jake's run game, but just the run game in general. This is kind of really that breakout game. So 223 on the ground for the run game. That is by far a season best for Camas's run game. 137 for Titan Brody, including a huge 66-yard run, also season highs as well for him. What's interesting to note, the 137 by Titan Brody would be fourth highest rushing total team-wise all year. Think about that.
Wow.
Think about just the progress of that run game, the tremendous play by that offensive line. So it was great to see kind of that shiny moment for that run game. And Davidson obviously had a couple of rushing touchdowns himself to kind of a number of kind of quarterback design runs. So again, when you're 6'3", 6'4", that's a tough body to bring down when you're Arlington's run defense trying to stop them.
Well, and to be a true dual threat quarterback like that, I had mentioned in my conversation with Coach Matheson that we had sort of known to look for that throughout the year, that was going to be a part of Jake Davidson's game that would be a point of emphasis. And I asked him, did he imagine that being something that would emerge as a weapon in the playoffs? And he said, absolutely. We were working all year on that part of his game for today and for next week and for the state playoffs, because that just makes you so much more of a dangerous team.
It is. So before the 223 on Saturday, the previous team high in rushing for Camas was only 169, and that was their Week 8 win over Union, a team that they put up 63 points against. So GP is going to be looking at that game film against Arlington to see not only stopping Jake Davidson in that passing attack, but also stopping his legs as well in the run game.
Yeah, but I think that kind of dual threat nature is going to be so much of a key to victory on Saturday against Gonzaga Prep, and will be one of the elements that defines who wins. Can Camas continue to do that, or can G Prep find a way to make the Papermakers one-dimensional? I think that'll go a long way to deciding what happens.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get to dessert. Our favorite part of the Thanksgiving spread, and that's the key to advancing to Husky Stadium on December 6th and December 7th. If Seton Catholic can win against Montesano, they would play at 3 p.m. on Friday, December 6th at Husky Stadium. If Camas can get back by Gonzaga Prep, they would play in the big showcase night game on Saturday, 7 p.m. at Husky Stadium. Key to getting to the title games. Let's start with Camas first.
I'm going to go twofer. I'm going to go Camas and Seton, because I think all three of these apply to both teams. So number one, take care of the ball, first and foremost. At this point in the season, there's only 4 teams left in each classification. Take care of the ball, limit your turnovers. So I think both Seton Catholic and Camas do a great job of not turning the ball over. And then when they do force a turnover, then they capitalize on offense. But second is also rely on the playmakers that got you to this point. So both teams love to throw the ball. We've seen what Jacob Williams can do in that run game for Seton Catholic, going behind that big offensive line. We've seen now the emergence of Camas's offensive line. I've talked about the growth of this O-line that really only had one returning starter from last year. But also rely on your defense. Also a key point that has gotten you here. Both teams tremendously on defense. We've spoke at length both of what Seton Catholic and Camas, what makes them so good defensively. So I think those three things, take care of the ball, rely on your playmakers, and go at it on defense, are going to be 3 key things for both teams in order to be at Husky Stadium next weekend.
Absolutely. And my contribution to that would be just stick with what got you here. no Tiger changes his stripes this late in the season, and especially on defense. What do they say about defense? It wins championships. And so obviously do what got you here. Rely on your playmakers, like you said, and don't make mistakes on blown coverage on defense. And I think probably the matchups end up being pretty favorable for both Camas and Seton Catholic this weekend at Mackenzie Stadium. Well, we hope you all have a joyous Thanksgiving. Eat lots of turkey and pumpkin pie for those of you who are still practicing and have a Thanksgiving morning practice. Enjoy it. Not many kids playing football in the state of Washington get this privilege to still be playing in late November. We can't wait to be at Mackenzie Stadium on Saturday. If last Saturday at Doc was any sort of preview, it's going to be some entertaining football and just some great quality of games to see there. And we'll see if we get to talk about football in December, which is always a treat.
This would be the first time, if Seton Catholic and Camas take care of business, will be the first time that Clark County has had two teams in the championship games since 2018, and both Hawkinson and Union both won state titles just a couple of hours apart up the Tacoma Dome a couple years back. That
was a fun day, and we hope for a great couple of days ahead. As always, follow us on 360 Preps on social media, 360preps.com for all the articles, the videos, and the pictures. We can't wait to be there. Hopefully you can make it out to Mackenzie Stadium on Saturday, and if so, we will see you at the field.